So we talked about constellations, and the ancient world, they looked up and they tried to make patterns out of things they saw, and then that eventually evolved into the 88 official constellations. Well, there's actually an unofficial grouping called an asterism that I want you to know about. Your book mentions asterisms and a little bit on chapters 27, not chapter, but on pages 27 and 28, but for some reason does not use the word asterism. So that's kind of a mistake on their part, I think, or a missed opportunity, because this is an actual word. An asterism is an unofficial grouping. So let's look at this group of stars right here and say, well, what do you see? Well, you probably see up here, those stars right there make the Big Dipper. Okay, so there we have the Big Dipper. Well, the Big Dipper is actually not a constellation. The constellation is Ursa Major, the Big Bear. Okay. Most people draw the bear, so the bear's facing to the right, so the head's over here, feet, and long fluffy tail. Problem with that is bears don't have long fluffy tails. H.A. Ray did a wonderful star chart, a sky atlas of the sky, in which he drew everything differently, and he drew the nose of the bear here, put the head here, and it actually looks like a bear, because you know the back legs are off this way, and it actually looks like a bear, correctly proportioned and everything. So he just pointed the bear the other direction. H.A. Ray, I don't know if anyone's familiar with him. He's actually famous because he also did a series of children's novels, children's stories called Curious George, but he also did star charts too, and so it's an interesting sort of thing there. The unofficial groupings, anybody can go out there and pick a bunch of stars and put them together and say, hey, that looks like a whatever, okay, and make an unofficial grouping right there. And so that is going to be this whole idea of an asterism. There's a bunch of asterisms that are out there. You know, in the summertime, early evenings, there's a group of 3 bright stars that are rising. Deneb is in the constellation Cygnus, the Swan. And Vega is in the constellation of Lyra, the Harp. And Altair, which is in the constellation Aquila, the Eagle. These 3 stars make a big triangle in the sky. In the summertime, that triangle is almost directly overhead at midnight. I know for a fact it's overhead at midnight because I've been out at midnight a lot. Especially this summer, we actually had several emergency trips to the ER at midnight, sitting in the parking lot because they wouldn't let us in because of the virus, and you're sitting up looking at stars. And it's like I was pointing out to my wife, oh, okay, there's that. Okay, anyway, but right overhead. Now, that was at that time, but the entire sky shifts because Earth moves around the sun. So if you go out tonight a little bit after sunset and look straight up, there's going to be this trio of stars high overhead. The one that's brightest is going to be Vega, and then a little bit to the east of it is going to be Deneb, and then Altair to the south. And so there we have it. Now, it turns out there's another asterism inside this same group. Cygnus is a swan, and there's a couple more stars in Cygnus that are like over there somewhere. So there's a star up here and a star down here. That makes the wings of a swan. But if you look at just the core stars that make up Cygnus, the 6 brightest stars that make up Cygnus make up a large cross in the middle of the sky. And so we often call that the summer cross. Okay, so that's actually 2 asterisms in one image right there. Another couple of asterisms. Remember I said that Pegasus looks like a big square in the sky with things hanging off of it. And so in fact, that asterism is in fact the great square of Pegasus. That's how people know Pegasus. They looked up and see the great big square in the sky. Okay, and Leo the lion has another famous asterism in it, and that looks like a sickle at the front end of the lion. It's supposed to be the head and front end of the lion. So that's another asterism right there. And so the sickle, that's part of it. That's another asterism. Turns out Sagittarius has another big asterism in it that looks like a teapot. Now, on your planisphere, asterisms are actually marked for you. And they are marked not just stars and not just constellations. You know, star names are weird. Constellation names are weird if you aren't familiar with them. So on your planisphere, all the constellation names are in capital letters to make it easy for you to find them. All the star names have lowercase letters in them, so you know which ones are star names, which ones are constellation names. And the asterisms are in parentheses. Okay, so here we have asterisms here. Another asterism that's often visible in the wintertime, they call the winter triangle, and that they're made up of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, Betelgeuse, and Procyon. Okay, and a book does mention these things, and actually that picture right there comes from your textbook. I just, don't know why I don't use the word asterism. Now, why do we care about learning all these patterns in the sky? Well, because first of all, when you see the pattern, it helps you orient yourself in the sky. The Big Dipper is one of these famous patterns right here, because if you find the Big Dipper, the two stars at this end of the Big Dipper point towards the North Star. So that's one way. That's when I was in the Boy Scouts, they said you find the North Star by finding the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is generally in the northern sky somewhere, and those two end stars of the Big Dipper point right at the North Star. The Little Dipper up here is really hard to see because it's normally really dim, but the Big Dipper is big and it's bright. The other interesting thing is there's a star Arcturus over here, one of the brighter stars in the sky. The Big Dipper has kind of a curved arm. So what you do is you can imagine how you find these next two stars, and they're all part of the same curve. So the saying that you often have here is you arc to Arcturus and continue spiking down to Spica. And so that helps you find the star Arcturus and the star Spica. And again, you're doing this by learning the patterns in the sky and letting those patterns help you orient yourself. So that's why we even bother learning stars and constellations, other than just simply it's kind of cool and you can go out and impress your friends by pointing up in the sky and saying what's what.